Today, I'm going to share a story from the Old Testament, the biggest blessing that affected millions of people. So stay tuned. Hey fellow soldiers, let's sharpen our swords together as we dive deep in the scriptures. We're going to be taking a break from the series In the Shadows But Happy, and we're going to be looking at a blessing that affected millions of people, and this blessing happened in the Old Testament. So let us turn to our scripture reading in Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 through 9. This is the story of the children of Israel. Now, I had talked about Joseph in a previous devotion, Joseph and Potiphar's wife. And Joseph was a Hebrew slave. He was a Hebrew prisoner, but that is not how he lived out the rest of his life. He was actually second in command of Pharaoh. He was a high leader governing the land of Egypt. And that's not where we're at in this story. He is actually dead, and there are 400 years that have passed between that story in Genesis and this story in Exodus. So that's where we are in the scripture. We have a new Pharaoh on the scene. He does not like the Hebrew people, the children of Israel, and he is actually fearful of them and has made them slaves in the land of Egypt. So when I'm talking about the children of Israel, it's a term referred to as the descendants of the 12 sons of Jacob. And the person I mentioned earlier, Joseph, he was one of those 12 sons. So we're looking at the descendants of Joseph. We're looking at the descendants of his other brothers, Dan, Asher, Naphtali, all of his other brothers. And we have a new Pharaoh on the scene, and there's new situation going on totally with 400 years have passed. So I'm going to read verses 7 through 9 in Exodus chapter 3. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppress them. These words are actually spoken. God had appeared to Moses in a burning bush. Now Moses is a Hebrew. In fact, he is not living in Egypt at this time. He is living with his in-laws in the land of Midian. So he's living with his wife and his wife's parents. And the Lord appears to him in this burning bush, and he chooses Moses to actually lead the children of Israel out of wicked Egyptian bondage. And Moses and his brother actually do this. It doesn't happen just right off the bat. It's not like he goes to Pharaoh and asks for Pharaoh for him to release his slaves, the Hebrew slaves. But he actually has to go to Pharaoh 10 times. 10 times before the Pharaoh actually gives the green light for Moses to lead millions of people to freedom. And when we look at this story, we tend to think that the blessing, the biggest blessing for the Hebrews was the day that happened, in which they were allowed to go and leave Egypt, allowed to be free. But their biggest blessing actually occurred during those 10 times in which Moses goes and asks Pharaoh's permission for the Hebrew slaves to be released. When Moses goes to approach Pharaoh in this monumental task, each time Pharaoh says no. Each time there is a plague. The Lord sends down a plague, not to everybody, not to the Hebrews and the Egyptians, but it falls on the Egyptians only. You know, you have to remember during this time when the Hebrews are living their lives, okay, before the plagues happened. The Hebrews didn't want to wake up in the morning. They didn't want to get started with their day. They hated their lives. They were being treated as subhumans. They were being treated as animals. And they did not like their life one bit. And one morning, they wake up and they're going to report to their job, right? Their taskmaster who's going to lay into them and beat them. But their taskmaster's not there. They find out, they look around, the water is no longer water in the river. It is blood. I'm not talking about there's parts of blood in the Nile River. I'm talking about the entire river is now blood. Every water source is blood. And they notice that they're not being affected by this. It is only the Egyptians there that are being affected by this. They are finally getting rest, relief from the lives that they hated. I can't even imagine the thoughts going on in their minds, the discussions going on among the children of Israel, how they cannot believe that a miracle is happening. And this actually continues 9 other times. You know, the first plague was the water being turned to blood. The second one was frogs. They had frogs everywhere. Not where the Hebrews lived, where the Egyptians lived. And we're not talking about just, a few frogs and we can handle this problem. We're talking about a nuisance. Something that affected their day-to-day life. Before these plagues happened, the Egyptians' lives, they loved their lives, right? Especially the taskmasters. They got to do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. But now the tables are turned. They can't even do a simple task, such as walking from one end of the house to the other. They have these overwhelming frogs. The third plague is lice. The fourth plague, flies. The fifth plague, cattle. There was a pestilence that happened with the cattle, and they died. The sixth plague, boils. The seventh plague, hail. We're not talking about little hail that we experience. These were huge pieces of hail that ruined crops. The eighth, locusts. The ninth, a thick darkness. And this darkness lasted for 3 days. But it wasn't darkness where the Hebrews lived. It was light, daylight. In the last plague, the 10th plague, the firstborn's death. This happened with the humans, the Egyptians, and with their animals. And that was when Pharaoh stopped being adamant, stopped being bullheaded, and let the Hebrew slaves experience freedom for the first time. I can't even imagine with the miracles that the Hebrews were seeing, and something that they thought would never be possible was now possible for them. They were experiencing freedom for the first time, freedom to commune with God. They saw Yahweh, God, in a way in which they had never seen him before. They got to experience him and commune with him on a daily basis. They got to experience his guidance with the next chapter in their lives. Let us think today about blessings that the Lord has done for us, how we have seen his power in our lives, how he has made the impossible very possible for us. May we always relish on these times in our lives. May we always celebrate these times in our lives. That is my spiritual food for you to munch on the rest of the week. I can't wait to see you next time.